All right. Thanks, everyone. We're getting up on 3 o'clock. You have entered track number 4 with Getting to the Heart of the Matter, SUNY Shared Collections Strategies, Past, Present, and Future, featuring Esta and Shannon. Shannon Pritting is the SUNY Library Shared Services Director. He has worked for, over the past few years to bring all of the SUNYs into Alma and Primo. And before that, Shannon worked in SUNY libraries in a variety of roles, such as director in public services and in access services. Esta Tovstiadi is the SUNY Shared Library Services Shared Collections Coordinator, where she develops strategies to meet current and emerging collection and access needs of SUNY libraries. Before joining SUNY, Esta worked as a discovery services librarian at SUNY Potsdam and in collections at the University of Colorado at Boulder. These two are great people. I'm blessed to be able to work with them as colleagues. We're going to have any questions come through the questions and answers down at the bottom of your screen. If you have any problems, let me know via chat and we'll do what we can. Over to you, Shannon and Esta.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. So let's just go ahead and get started and get right to it. We're going to talk about past, present, and future for SUNY collections and collection strategies. And, just talk about what the opportunities are and, just try to do as much of a brief history and then, leave some time to discuss what everyone thinks as well. So one of the things I was, kind of thinking of tying this all together, and you've all seen this quote from George Santayana, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. There's a lot of different iterations of it. If you look at the larger context of this quote, there's a lot of discussion about perpetual change and, the difference between progress and change and the ability to identify what had happened in the past and the obstacles and different ways to not just change but to actually move forward or progress. So this is kind of what we're hoping to do is to look at what has happened in the past and then let that inform how we approach the future. Not to say that we have that anything that happened in the past wasn't successful, but there's always different contexts, there's always different opportunities and different influencing factors as well. So I will say I'm not the official historian of SUNY libraries, so if I get something a little bit wrong, there's always many different perspectives. I tried to get different perspectives on what happened and when things were a little bit up in the air. So feel free to put in your own perspective if you were around when these things were happening and you're like, that's not how it went down. So some of the trends that I was seeing as I was looking through the past of SUNY collection initiatives is that there has always been this large interest in coordinating system-wide collections, but it is counterbalanced by a strong commitment to build local collections. I mean, I think you can see every level of library has this, just interconnected to its organizational fiber, this desire to think very critically and intellectually about its collection. So you can see that through liaison programs, you can see it through just a lot of individual effort put into the local collection, whether it's print or electronic, and having that be something that is specific to that institution. But on the other hand, we all like system initiatives and we want to work collaboratively. And I think that's always been, kind of this nice interplay, but it's also been something that's been somewhat of a restricting factor as well. And when initiatives do come up or strategies are developed, they've been largely informal or, kind of something that is getting together and talking about it, and then if anything comes out of it, it's great, it's organic. Or it's been something that's highly focused on a specific type of collection or a sector or a specific issue that comes up, during a transition. And then just every single time I looked at something, there was this just recurring issue about subsidization, and having that be needed to facilitate coordination. And that subsidy, you might think that it's always going to come from the central level, but you'll see multiple times that individual institutions, and I wouldn't even say the institution as much as the library or the leader in the library, that they've taken that on at the campus level. So there's always been this sense that there needs to be startup money, and it's not going to come from the collective necessarily, that it's going to, some subsidy is needed to get things moving forward. And largely a shift to coordinated purchasing, management of e-resources, it's been very limited beyond SUNY Connect and ScienceDirect. That's not to say there isn't any of it going on, but there hasn't been a lot of it. So really it's ScienceDirect, SUNY Connect, the last 15 years, that those have been the two major collections that SUNY has focused on. So I'm going to just start talking through phases, and I think phases usually connect with the organizations or the institutions that were driving those phases in SUNY. I'm going to skip the big phase, which was 1973 through 1999, which was the SUNYOCLC network, because I think that was largely about print, which was very hard to do collaboratively. But I think there was some interest there. And then in 1999, I knew, Susan, I knew you would appreciate this. I knew, so in 1999, the SUNYOCLC network, and this had been coming before 1999, split off into both OLIS and NYlink. And then NYlink grew to be much larger than SUNY, had a sizable staff. They served over 300 libraries, a lot of group resource procurement. So they closed in 2010, 2011, around that time frame. And then after that closure in 2010, 2011, the group resource procurement really was kind of split up and or just didn't happen. So OLIS took on the OCLC SUNY contract management. So we've had since then 2 5-year master agreements, as most of you know. And then after that split, or after NYlink closing, OLIS reviewed any products or services that were over $20,000 in total spend, and had 4 campuses. And some of the big spend that came out of this was the 360 link, 360 search serial solutions, group purchase, which later we went to SFX, and then later went to EDS / holdings management or full text finder. And then there were a few e-resources that were analyzed, things like Project Muse, but no contracts developed. So, if the ScienceDirect was already happening, so there was nothing new that came out of NYlink closing that OLIS took on. And then, thankfully, ESLIN took on ELD management from NYlink as well. So that leaves us at about 2010, and I'm going to jump around a little bit because there are some parallel strains going on here. And the other major collective collecting type of activity has been SUNY Connect, and this began 1988, 1999. The library director, who was, I guess, retired or semi-retired from Purchase, Larry Randall, was the initial manager. Okay, thanks for there was some clarification on that ESLIN didn't directly take it. It was Naishi first until Naishi ended. So 1988, 1999, this is when SUNY Connect started. The initial focus, and I think this is kind of an interesting thing that SUNY Connect had more than just databases or more than just content. There was the document delivery or courier services, so things that became the IDS project, that became ELD or land/ELD. And then online information literacy instruction, that there was a sense that we should do more collaboratively there. This has been around for a long time. And then shared remote storage facilities, you'll see this coming true later. And then databases for images and other digital collections. And then also a common library software system, which became Aleph. There were some other iterations before that as well. And then interestingly, in 2001, the SUNY Connect Advisory Council, this had a lot of cross functional input. So library directors, provosts, business officers, CIO representatives, that they were all part of this advisory council for SUNY Connect, because it was seen as a major system-wide initiative that had a lot of value. And then that just kind of slowly, became more of a library thing. And then the advisory council just ended. So SUNY Connect was evolving from 1995, Slick Hat, lots of really great acronyms. So OLIS had a group of directors and others to look at commercial products or commercial information products. Sounds very similar to some things that have been going on recently, to act as an advisory board to OLIS and to get us moving forward as SUNY with group procurement of the things that were going to be coming very, very soon, which were online databases. Probably at that point were CD-ROMs as well. So the evolution of SUNY Connect, if you look at where it came from the last 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, it's matured into what I think has become a pretty regular 3-year renewal, where we get a variety of different people from different sectors to review what has become a group agreement on aggregator databases for all of SUNY that are cross-discipline and generally meet the needs of all of SUNY, or all of SUNY benefits enough for them because they're hitting areas that enough of us have that it plugs in well enough for most campuses. So coming out of SUNY Connect and the desire to have a document delivery and group-wide resource sharing for SUNY, the IDS project came about largely because there were attempts to get universal borrowing working in Aleph, and that just didn't work out. So there was a need to develop something different. And then IDS adopted Illiad across SUNY, or most of SUNY. And this began in 2004, heavily subsidized by SUNY Geneseo for about a 15-year period. For a long time, no libraries paid any membership fee. That's a relatively new thing. So now the IDS project is self-sustaining, but for a long time it was SUNY Geneseo that was subsidizing, with some initial startup funds provided by OLIS. And what came out of the IDS project was a general SUNY resource sharing community and a system so that there was reliable resource sharing across all of SUNY. So some of the major things: centralized holdings management, the alias system, and then a real shift in how collections were viewed, the buy versus borrow movement, coordinated collection development, which came out of the Getting It Systems or GIST Getting It Systems toolkit, which was a customization of the Illiad software. And then the IDS project, looking to be sustainable, started to move outside of SUNY and then outside of New York to get more membership income, and now only about 35% of the members are SUNY. So as IDS was more successful, and I think the GIST movement brought a lot more people together from the director and the collections and acquisitions groups to collaborate more, and that brought about C4D and a real focus on coordinated collection development. And depending on who you ask, there's a rule of 5 or there's a rule of 3. I've heard most the rule of 3, so we'll call it that, which is if 3 comprehensive colleges own a title, then that's not one that you buy. So that there is not a lot of need for duplication, especially if you have a good resource sharing system, which was developed through the IDS project. So this was 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit less, starting in 2008, and it was brought about by comprehensive sector directors and trying to move into things that would be more tangible and lead to true coordinated collection development through this group. And I think there was there's a lot of good things that came out of this group. The rule of 3 is still adhered to, but it's still another thing that's, I think even persist as an organic movement, not necessarily formalized, a lot of good discussions. So just kind of looping back to operationalizing versus organic, this is a really great example of that. And it brought on more collection diversity through purchase on demand via ILL, especially with the GIST movement, and having the patron select whether you should buy it, and then using the OCLC conspectus and whether 3 campuses have it. So really looking at point of need and coordinated collection development. So as this was developing, there was an interest to do more technical and big data analysis. And for 1 or 2 years, I've seen different information on this, but it was at least 1 year that the WorldCat collection analysis was subsidized centrally or subsidized in some way and made available to libraries heavily in the comprehensive sector. And then as this was also happening, OLIS pulled in Aleph data into the SUNY Business Intelligence and created dashboards for all but the university centers so that there could be more high-level analysis about coordinated collection development. So some interesting things going on there as well to look at how could we build a more diverse collection in SUNY as far as not duplicating. And what came out of a lot of this data analysis, and this is something where you could argue of like where that actual connection was, is the SUNY One Project. And this was campuses from 8 different SUNYs, and these were cross-sector, pooling money together for multiple years. If something was requested and it wasn't available in SUNY, that pooled money would purchase a first copy to diversify the collection of SUNY. And there wasn't insignificant amounts of money, and in some years 1,500 to 2,000 titles were purchased. So it was a pretty big project as well. And coming in around this same time, a little bit later, there was the Empire Shared Collection, which recently closed or ended, where SUNYs and non-SUNYs bought into a shared collection that was housed in the University of Buffalo Library's offsite storage or annex. And then the focus was on sharing access to journal runs, fast document delivery, and the ability to say it's going to be in the Empire shared collection, so I don't myself as an individual library need to retain this print journal run. This, I think, connecting it back to the early days of SUNY Connect was a really interesting realization of a desire to have shared print storage, more collaboration on collections. This, I think, was a very good connection. Yeah, and great point, Jennifer. And please forgive me for not bringing in all of the people who were involved, but the Western New York Library Resources Council did a lot to facilitate the Empire Shared Collection as well. All right, so I'm going to move into non-print for a while. So our major non-SUNY Connect subscription or group purchasing has been ScienceDirect, and this is something that has taken up the vast majority of our attention in group collecting in the digital space every couple of years. And it began in 2005 and based mostly on, what big deals are based on is print subscriptions and the spend on print subscriptions. And then if you look through the history of our collection, of our contracts and our relationship with ScienceDirect and, a major SUNY subscription, there were often subventions or subsidizations needed to make this happen. So Holly asked, what has happened with or to the materials in the Empire Shared Collection? So the materials are, to my knowledge, Buffalo isn't weeding anything from their offsite storage, so the materials are still in the annex. If anybody has any other information that would counter that, let me know, but that's my understanding. Yep, and then good point, Jennifer. The shared ownership piece, that's what's ending. All right, so Susan's bringing up that the internal ScienceDirect cost sharing model was changed to be something that was a little bit different than the historic print spend, but the overall deal pricing was still tied to that to the initial print spend. Yeah, good point. So in 2019. This was the first year that we had changed from a big deal. Obviously, there were always different iterations of the deal, but for the most part, it was a big portion of the ScienceDirect or the ScienceDirect Freedom Collection, and then moved to a much smaller 248 titles. And the thing to note about this is that for a consortium of our size and the amount of time that we've been working together, it's really surprising to me that ScienceDirect has been our only persistent big deal, especially knowing how much duplicate spending and duplicate subscriptions there are across SUNY. And I think that's one of the things that we want to talk about going into the future. And I wanted to just kind of point out of like ScienceDirect has been a very good example of collaboration, and hopefully it's something we can expand more upon. So from 2010 to 2020, and this is the end of NYlink into right now, there really was very little shared purchasing, a few GVRL deals. SUNY Press eBooks and Net Library are the major ones, and outside of that, it's ScienceDirect and SUNY Connect. And then what began to develop in this time from 2010 to 2020 is to develop models that would work around what is our nature, which is that SUNY has a lot of different types of campuses. So a couple of different types of models where SUNY in the central office, and we're mostly talking about John Schumacher in the past, would work to get an all-in price and then get enough campuses to pay for it to subsidize the rest of SUNY, so that everyone got access at a really low price, but not everyone paid. That's one deal that has come up over and over again, or one type of deal. New England Journal of Medicine is the one that we have currently like that. And then we have other agreements where SUNY handles the negotiation, and some of the terms, et cetera, the internal selling to campuses, and making campuses understand the value, or helping campuses understand the value. But the vendor bills directly, either sometimes with a central agreement or separate agreements. And then those are the only two types of agreements that have happened. One of the SUNY handles the negotiation, but vendor is working separately with the individual campuses, is Chronicle of Higher Education, but we have others like that too. So during this period where there's not a lot going on with SUNY central purchasing, the campuses who can who can do this and start to find other ways to do group buying to get some sort of a percentage off of list. Waldo is one that we know that most of SUNY uses. A small group use Lyricist, and the bigger campuses and the smaller doctorals as well use NERL, Northeastern Research Libraries Consortium as well. So, going outside of SUNY for these group purchases. And then, as this is also going on, there's a parallel track of shared collections through technology, starting back at the turn of the century, 1999, 2000. OLIS takes over responsibility for managing the technology, and then the SLAM project, where Maureen was involved in leading that, moving from disparate systems into a single system with Aleph, and then in 2019, moving from Aleph to Alma Primo V. And then in each of these cases, just kind of putting it out there, SUNY system has done the initial subsidization needed. So with Alma Primo, the central office took funding that could have potentially gone to collections that was needed for subsidizing technology adoption. So there's always these trade-offs going on as well. But I think in general, there has been a fair amount of subsidization of any technology that is touching all of us as well. All right, so with this too of how these central technologies connect up with union catalogs. So you've got the SUNY Union catalog, IDS Search, Primo V, very focused on OCLC and connecting into OCLC data until Primo V. And then in the 2008, 2013, two different prompts to see if we wanted to do something group-wide with Discovery. And then 2013, taking the action for most of SUNY to move on to EDS. 2019, the SUNY Libraries Consortium comes about, and then this was developed as a method to move operations out of OLIS, or the SUNY System Administration Office, or centrally, with the two major goals and the charge of the CPC was to recommend e-resource group subscriptions, and then to identify savings that would make up for or cancel out the funding needed to be a member of the SLC. So two major initiatives that the CPC achieved during their time up to this point are purchasing of the American Antiquarian Society archives, and then the ScienceDirect negotiation and the non-renewal of Scopus. I'm going to turn it over to Esta, and sorry I didn't give you more time, Esta.
That's fine. So I just wanted to start by going back to one of the principles that Shannon mentioned on the first slide. So, knowing what our shared collections have looked like in the past really does help us inform our future approaches, especially when we're encountering a lot of similar problems and opportunities today. So I want to start by taking a look at some of the trends that have impacted us in the past and that continue to impact collection development in libraries. Next slide, Shannon. So the first is shrinking library budgets. So this is no news to anyone here, but according to the ALA, 80% of academic libraries have seen decreased or flat budgets in the past 5 years. That number seems kind of low to me. And at the same time, the annual EBSCO Serials price projection report has continued to report annual increases of around 5 to 7%. So there has also been in libraries a renewed focus on the user experience, especially as it relates to library collections. So libraries are more focused than ever on how students and faculty are using the various formats available in the library in their teaching, learning, and research. And there have been numerous studies on how changes in library technologies like link resolvers and discovery layers impact that use and the retrieval of our collections. So while all that's happening, the proliferation of discovery layers means that our users are interacting with our collections in a new way, but they're also able to discover more content than ever before, and more content that maybe libraries didn't traditionally consider as part of their collection. Which has kind of led libraries, which has been one thing that has led libraries to try to build broader collections and to take advantage of collection development models that allow for immediate access versus only building collections based on subscribed or owned resources. And one of the ways that many libraries are broadening their access to a variety of resources is through shared or cooperative collection development. So you can go to the next slide. So I just wanted to share a few examples of what collaboration between academic libraries can look like and does look like today in regards to collections and how some other consortia in North America are approaching this opportunity. So next slide. So I want to start with Connect New York, and this is maybe one that you're already familiar with. It's a consortium of academic libraries in New York State. A lot of their work has been focused on shared collections. For example, they currently have a shared demand-driven access ebook program through JSTOR. They've previously done shared ebook programs with other vendors, such as ProQuest and on the MyLibrary platform as well. They also have what they call a shared print trust, which is basically collections of print materials that they've identified to be held for a certain amount of time, based on the subject or the need, things like that. So what they're basically doing is deciding as a group what print resources to keep and for how long. Next slide. So another one I'd like to point out is the Colorado Alliance of Research Libraries, also known as CARL. So this is a consortium of academic libraries in Colorado and Wyoming, and they've been around for about 50 years. And some of their shared collections initiatives include a catalog of over 50 academic, public, and special libraries, which they say contains more than 30 million items, and they allow borrowing between those libraries very similarly to how SUNY is doing resource sharing. Another service that they provide is hosting for a shared digital repository that some of their members are participating in. So they're providing the technology, hosting, and staff and hardware for that repository. I didn't mention it on here, but they also coordinate a shared ebook DDA program pretty successfully as well. But finally, they've created, so about 20 years ago, they created a homegrown modular ERM tool, so an e-resources management system, which is still in use by some libraries today, but they had a really interesting component of it that had some advanced collection analysis capabilities. They do some, it basically allows for overlap analysis like you may have seen in Serial Solutions or in ALMA. But they also offer a sort of print overlap analysis. So you can buy this service and compare your print holdings to all the other libraries for which they have print holdings information. And so some of the libraries in this consortium do this, and so it's sort of an informal way of building a shared collection, kind of like our rule of three. You know, they might do this overlap analysis and see, oh, these 5 other schools have this, so and maybe it's not a good purchase for our collection. And yeah, that's a great point. I didn't know that they had, someone mentioned in the chat, they've recently enhanced the service to allow for circulation data to be loaded as well. So that'll be a really interesting thing. Next slide. So there are also more formalized shared print initiatives, and the Big Ten Academic Alliance is one really good example. So this is an alliance of research universities in the Midwest, and they collaborate on initiatives not only within libraries, but also across the university in areas like procurement, technology infrastructure, and professional development. Some of their library initiatives include funding third-party accessibility evaluations for e-resources that many of the members of their consortia own or are considering for purchase. They started doing that last year, and they have shared these evaluations on their website if you're interested in downloading them and seeing them. Another shared collection project that they worked on was a geospatial data portal that included GIS data sets and digitized historical maps from member institutions, among other content. And the libraries were part of the group that built the metadata for the resources within this portal. They are also have worked with Google Books to digitize volumes from their member libraries, and they were founding partners of the HathiTrust Digital Library. So since 2011, they have funded, they have collaboratively funded, sorry, my son is crying in the other room, but don't worry, my husband's with him. They funded a shared collection of print journal back files. And they also do, similarly to what SUNY's going to be doing soon and has done in the past, they offer reciprocal borrowing between member library collections, as well as sharing print resources via a model similar to our resource sharing. And finally, they are in the beginning stages of sort of coordinating future collection development. And there was a big OCLC report on how they're looking to build more as a collective rather than focusing as much on local collections. Okay, next slide. So the last example I want to talk about is the Ontario Council of University Libraries. So this is a consortium of 21 libraries in Ontario, Canada. And they do coordinate shared purchasing and shared collections like the Big Ten, like other library consortia, but they're also doing something really unique with their digital content. They have built a platform called Scholars Portal, where they are hosting ebook and e-journal content, among other types of content that they have purchased from vendors. So, thanks, Jennifer. Rather than purchasing ebooks and having them hosted on a vendor's platform, they're hosting the actual files and metadata on their own platform, sort of providing a really consistent user experience. They're doing some similar things with accessible content. And they're also hosting e-journal and ebook publishing systems on this portal as well. They have really done a lot with shared collections, and I think they're really pushing the boundaries and expanding the definition of what a collaborative collection can really look like. Next slide. So just to sum up some of the examples I've talked about and some of the ways that we could translate those as opportunities for us to collaborate within SUNY libraries. So one of the first steps that SLSS and OLIS are working on is to secure more centralized contracts. So as it currently stands, all SUNY libraries have to hold their own contracts with vendors unless they're working through another consortia. So we know that this is a huge burden on the campuses. So we're working on a multi-vendor request for proposals for about 40 vendors that many of the libraries are already working with. And our hope is that we're going to get some better and more consistent licensing terms to make procurement easier at the campus level, as well as some discounts and potentially an opportunity for us to utilize central billing. A few other potential projects we're thinking about, we're exploring, I've listed, just gonna rush through them pretty quickly. A shared print collection, which whether that's offsite storage for creating a shared archive for journals or monographs, or it could be that we look at ways to collaborate before we purchase and think about how we can utilize resource sharing to distribute print across the consortium. Similarly, we could look at building a shared ebook collection. We could also build off the work that we did breaking down the Elsevier deal and look at other large journal packages. We're currently working with Unsub, which is formerly of Unpaywall Journals, to look at the Wiley subscriptions at several campuses. And finally, we want to continue some of the work that's already been done to promote open access on our campuses and work with publishers to develop licenses and agreements that further open access across SUNY. This is one of our goals with the multi-vendor RFP, to push for better publishing terms for SUNY authors, whether that is a discounted APC or something else, as well as explore other models that support open access. So you can go to the next slide. So just to sum up, SUNY has a history of valuing shared collections initiatives, but we've struggled to sustain work in that area. And formalizing these programs could really help build that sustainability. With ALMA and the work that SLSS and OLIS have been doing, we now have dedicated tools, infrastructure, and people to help coordinate these initiatives to move them forward. So we're really excited about what the future holds for shared collections in SUNY, and we're really looking forward to working with everyone on building better library collections across the system.
There's a question in the question and answers from Purchase College. Great name for this question. Would the central purchasing project serve to replace our Waldo Lyrasis other procurement networks or somehow be parallel to it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how I see this is certainly if that makes sense for you as a library to continue with Waldo, Lyrasis, etc. I mean, there's going to be no requirement for that, but the what we're hoping to do with kind of a major RFP is to work around the issues that we have with getting vendors on state contracts so that we can negotiate terms that will be acceptable to your purchasing office. So if your purchasing office just lets you sign an order form with Waldo and you're good, then, and you're getting a better deal, that might make sense. But I suspect we're all going down the same path, which is increased scrutiny of terms on licenses, increased scrutiny of accessibility, compliance, increased scrutiny of like, how does this conform to a variety of other things with New York State standards. And that's what we're hoping to do with this RFP that you might get through other group purchasing venues, or you might not.
And another question, have you considered working with private academics on a shared collection?
Yes, so we have that. There are some institutions, and I guess the shared collection, if we're talking about group purchasing, that's something that we're getting some input from SUNY Council of how we can do that. We certainly have precedents that Alfred University has consistently been involved with our procurement, but expanding it beyond Alfred University might, catch some additional review, but we are looking at that. And I think as far as a shared collection or shared collecting, that's a great idea. We continue to talk to Connect New York and others, and I'd say we're open to it, but we're doing the work to make sure that we're dotting all our SUNY I's, or our New York State I's.
And Purchase, as a follow-up, said they would definitely prefer the central project. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's you're asking a great question. You will have to, as individual libraries, you will have to help us to let vendors know that, or publishers know that it's in their best interest to work with us on this major RFP because of the scrutiny that is coming in purchasing. And I think it's already there at 15, 20 campuses already, because they would prefer to not open up another realm of discussion if they don't have to, and I don't blame them for it. So you'll have to help us with that.
And I bet this is coming from Cheryl Nab at NYlink. Perhaps ESLN could be part of that discussion. She's great on shared projects like that. That was my editorial comment. She just said perhaps ESLN could be part of the discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that if we were going to involve private New York State colleges, that I think ESLN would be great, or just generally, because there's a lot of positives that could that could happen with that too. You have a lot more flexibility. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got 2 more minutes left. Another thing to consider is the CCDA money that every independent in SUNY receives through each council. That could be part of a package solution.
Yeah, that's a great point. A great point.
And from Holly Chambers, get SUNY and campus admins to understand there is an advantage to this. I think that's more of a request rather than a question.
I would say we have spent many, many hours doing that, and that's why we're even mentioning this RFP, is that I think we have a lot of, we've done a lot of that work to understand that there's an advantage to it. Campus admins, I'm hoping that they will understand this as well, but I think you'll have to help us with that.
All right, we have just enough time for one more question. And Susan D. appreciates the trip down memory lane, Shannon.
I am surprised that Susan did not find more things that I got wrong or not complete enough, but.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. It's 3:49, so plenty of time to switch to your next track. Thanks for participating, and hopefully we'll continue to go along the shared collections path.